Good afternoon, everybody. Christine Barconi here in the NBC4i Streaming Center for another Buckeye Breakdown with Coach Bill Conley, Sports Director Jared Smalley, and Sports Reporter Justin Holbrook, as the Buckeyes are scheduled to travel to Michigan State this week for a football game.
Hypothetically.
Scheduled to. I changed my verbiage.
All together, let's cross our fingers and our toes.
Well, first of all, amazing dexterity if you can cross your toes. That's pretty impressive.
I can do that. It's not that hard.
I can't do that.
It takes some work. I was over at Ohio State earlier today and talked to some of the media folks who work over there. And I think they're pretty confident the game's going to be played Saturday, at least from the Ohio State perspective, right? From what you can control. I think they're pretty confident that the game will be played, that they're under the Big Ten threshold, and that they're as confident, I guess, as you can be right now for a team coming off a COVID cancellation that they're going to play. But they're obviously cautious this week. They're still cautious. Ryan Day said over the weekend he was hoping that by Thursday, if the team could go through a full pad practice, the full contact, that they would be in pretty good shape to go play Saturday. Tomorrow's Thursday. We'll see if that actually materializes. They did practice yesterday. They're practicing today. Everything's on schedule. They haven't done any media availabilities. I wouldn't read a lot into that. The coach's radio show will happen tomorrow as scheduled. Obviously, Ryan's not coaching Saturday. So there are some things that are just different about this week that wouldn't I think things are on schedule, but I also think they're very cautious about how they're going about things. Bill, we just got the note about Michigan canceling for Saturday. That's not good.
No, it's not good at all, because you don't know how severe the situation is, and you don't know really if they've reached their threshold in terms of numbers, or if it's just they're trying to stay a step ahead like we did a week ago.
Justin, let's get into this. And Bill, we're going to go around the horn here because everybody's going to have an opinion on this.
Okay.
Justin, let's say Michigan can't play next week. And Ohio State, let's say they play this week, win the game. They've got 5 wins, but they don't have the Big Ten minimum 6. Earlier this week, the ACC amended their rules to basically ensure that Clemson and Notre Dame would be in the championship game in the ACC, essentially locking their spot in the Final Four and maybe a good chance to get 2 teams in if Clemson can avenge that loss and they could get in. So my point, Justin, is if Michigan can't play next week, should the Big Ten change its rules?
Yeah. I mean, the simple answer is yes, because they came up with that number of you have to play 6 games. It was an arbitrary number at the beginning of the season. They had no idea what the season was going to look like. So how can you say in September that it has to be 6 games and by the end of the season? That's a hard and fast number. I don't think that they can defend that. And they can't defend putting the 2nd or 3rd or 4th best teams in the Big Ten championship when you very clearly have the best team that's just waiting to play in that title game. So It makes no sense to me. And Ohio State's going to have to jump through so many hoops to play other teams. If other games get canceled, it's a world when it boggles your mind of what they're going to have to do to try to get that 6th game in. So it makes more sense for the conference just to say, hey, you know what? That number, it's out the door. Let's just have the 2 best teams playing the title game.
And so, Bill, the process of doing that, obviously athletic directors are all going to have to, across the Big Ten Conference, agree that's the right path forward. I don't know how easy a sell that's going to be. But, I mean, I can certainly understand the argument, Bill. Can you give us an idea of how you think that might play out?
Well, I think, first of all, I think Justin's really right on with this thing. You got to stay flexible in this situation. It's not a normal year at all. And I'm concerned because the committee for the playoffs this week mentioned that, the talk of Ohio State not having enough games could have an indefinite effect on whether they make it or not. And here's the interesting thing about that committee. There's only one conference that has 2 representatives on it. Guess which one that is? And that's the SEC. Mm-hmm. With those schools, by the way, being Texas A&M, R.C. Slocum, who used to coach, obviously, right, at A&M, and the Florida athletic director. What teams happen to be 5 and 6 in the voting right now?
I did not think of that.
So I think it's crucial. It is crucial that the Big Ten open their eyes. Now, the guy at the head of the committee is, of course, from Iowa, the athletic director from Iowa.
Yeah, Gary.
So hopefully maybe he'll have some influence within the conference. But I think obviously we've got to have some help, being that we do have one of the 4 best teams in the country. I don't think anybody argue that point, and they even said that. Make sure we get in.
I think the interesting part of this, Christine, is going to be from now on, whenever Ohio State plays a game, they better look really good.
Yeah.
They'd better play really, really well. And the factor in the equation that none of us know outside of the building down the street at Olentangy River Road
who is going to
is
play.
who's playing.
Yep.
Now, we have some idea of some of the players who might be affected, but not a very broad idea. And we're not going to identify anybody, but I think it's important to note that at this point, I don't know that it would be super alarming. And obviously we don't know everybody, so it'd be unfair to even start down that line. When
do we find that out? And
good question.
Normally, when is it normally?
Good, perfect question. And I got an update on that today. Here's why. So ordinarily on Friday morning before a Saturday game, Ohio State at 10 a.m. will issue an availability report. It basically lists who is not available to play and who would be a game time decision. It doesn't go into detail about the injury or the circumstances. Okay, so you're not getting like an NFL style injury report of knee, ankle, hip, etc. You're getting can play, might play, won't play, that kind of thing. Okay, so I asked Ohio State today when that information would be available, and if they were going to play last week, which they were planning to until 10:30 Friday night, they were going to issue that report Saturday morning of the game around 9:30. That is the plan for this week. So there will not be an injury report out on Friday. So we wouldn't know on Friday morning, for example, who is unavailable to play. That list would just include all those players together who are injured and or not available due to COVID. So they would all be listed together. You could maybe figure it out in some circumstances, but not entirely. So that information wouldn't be available until probably Saturday morning around 9:30.
We haven't talked since last Friday at 10:30. Jared and Justin, you guys were probably working. Coach probably keeping up on this. I got the push notification on my phone like everybody else. What was that process like? Did they just send out an email? Were there rumblings of it before? What was that like for you guys finding things out?
I'll start on that because I was sitting in the office working on it. Yeah. And so I started to get some texts and some rumblings like, hey, are you hearing? And that kind of thing, and checking around. I'm like, oh, that's not good. There's too much too much smoke.
Yeah.
So that was around 10 o'clock Friday. And then the email came out, I think, right around 10:30 or right in that neighborhood on Friday night that the game was officially canceled. And earlier in the day, Friday, we had received an email from the school that they were on schedule to play. That was the email that said Ryan Day had been diagnosed with COVID and would not be available, and down the line. At that point, they were still planning to play. But what they had done at that point was issued a new round of testing. And when the results of that testing came back, and there were at least one new case, we don't know how many new cases, but there were obviously some.
Right.
Then they decided to not move forward with the game. And in retrospect, probably a wise decision because they've been able to practice this week and start to get back to work. And that was the point of the testing process. The Big Ten setup was rapid testing to quickly identify potential spread and eliminate it or reduce it as much as possible. So in that regard, the system helped Ohio State. But Bill, then I text you Friday night, and you're like, oh boy. And so we got together and started talking on Friday about what to do next. And obviously we heard from Ohio State Saturday about that process. And it's hard to see people, Bill, who are working so hard for something and making so many personal sacrifices run into a problem that they just can't seem to tame.
Yeah, it's frustrating because, coaches are control freaks, and you like to control your situations. You like to control your environment, like control everything, and really you have no control. But I think the key that we knew something could be up was when the team made the decision not to travel. It's a Saturday morning. Very unusual situation. Not a big deal because it's only an hour flight, but you could tell they were waiting for something, and that something obviously was another round of tests.
You know what, Justin? I had up Flight Aware Friday, and I was tracking the Buckeye plane. And to Bill's point, when I saw the departure date pushed back, I went, "Oh boy, this is going to be a weird Friday night." And then, obviously, the flight was never updated because it was eventually canceled.
Mm-hmm.
But when it was pushed back to a 9 o'clock departure, I went, "Oh boy, like how is that going to work?"
It reminds you of when you were a kid and you had the Santa tracker, and it just seems like it's taking forever.
Yep. You know what? That's a good point. Flight Aware is grown-up Santa tracker.
Listen, Flight Aware is awesome. Isn't that how we knew exactly when coaches were perhaps coming to Ohio State and touching down here and knew when to be at the airport?
Planes that originated from, say, Gainesville, Florida.
Perhaps, yeah. How'd you guys know? I don't know.
But I digress.
Great scouting.
That's right.
We have our tricks. Now everybody knows.
Well, speaking of control, Coach, I have a question for you. With Ryan Day not being on the sideline this week, how do you think that will work with him obviously not being there for that game?
Well, I think being that the team was expecting the same situation last week, I think that helps. And plus, you got Larry Johnson, the guy who's been around the block. He knows what's going on. The kids respect him. They like him. And really, you know, when you think about actual game day operations and things like that, all the coaches are involved anyway. So I think it's not that big of a deal. It's going to hurt Ryan Day more than anybody else just by not being there on the sideline where he wants to be.
Coach, let me ask a related question to that. Obviously, Ryan Day's not there. That means he's not calling plays. So that duty would then fall to Kevin Wilson, who, by the way, has called plenty of plays in his life as a coordinator and even as a head coach. He's called plenty of football plays. That shouldn't be a big departure from the norm. But, Bill, in your understanding of how the process works with play calling there, how would it alter that process a bit?
Well, first of all, the head coach wouldn't have any immediate input on the decision. Let me tell you, for example, say you have your game call sheet, your play sheet, and let's say it's a certain down and distance situation for the offense. Well, in that particular situation, in a particular area of the field, you may have 3-4 calls you can make. And you pick off your chart basically the one you're going to run, and that's when the head coach might say, well, let's do this one, not the other one. But it's not a big deal because in your game plan, you expect all those things to work. So I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah, you never call a play that you think is going to fail.
No.
That's not good coaching. But I think, with Larry Johnson, it's interesting. And Bill, you know him very well. It's hard to think of a coach, an assistant coach in college football, who is more widely respected and beloved by his players than Larry Johnson. Frankly, I can't think of any because he's done it forever. His tenure at Penn State obviously led to dozens of NFL high prospects and talents and guys that went on to great careers and lives. And then all he's done at Ohio State is take it to another level. I mean, what he's done there is incredible. The fact that he would be he's been a head coach. It was at high school, but T.C. Williams High School, Virginia, made famous in the Remember the Titans movie. That's the last game he was a head coach, was at T.C. Williams. And Bill, I just can't. It's almost unfair that Ohio State can take this guy and insert him as a head coach and have somebody that is universally respected and admired to just pop in that role.
Yeah, and the thing about it, in the crazy times, he's the least crazy coach out there. I mean, he's as calm a guy as there is. He speaks softly but carries a big stick. Everybody listens to what he says.
Well, I'll tell you what now. When he speaks up, it gets your attention. He's got he's got the power of a minister at the front of the church.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That's what he's like.
I mean, when he calls you to order, you listen. And he's a commanding presence anyway. But then when he gets that voice, when you hear him talk, he has a bass-driven voice that commands attention and respect. And when he gets in for the pregame speech, whoo!
Yeah, you don't have to worry about him being hurt.
He could run a 5-minute mile.
I mean, no kidding. Like none of us with any athletic ability could run out there and think we could do it.
We do have some questions coming in. People are asking. Marshall wants to know: have we heard from any athletes over the past few weeks? How is Justin doing?
He was practicing last week. I don't know of any change there. And, obviously, look, that's the biggest concern people have, right? Because they don't have a tremendously deep quarterback situation. The next two best players are true freshmen. Only one of them has actually played the game, and he played the final minutes there against Nebraska, Jack Miller. So obvious concern there. We haven't heard anything specific to Justin. But like I said, he did practice last week, even after the original cases had become sort of semi-public knowledge. So I think that's probably the best news you can get.
All right. Let me see. For those of you guys who are watching here on Facebook with us, if you guys have any questions for Jared or Coach or Justin, let us know and we can get them answered for you. I don't know much about the Michigan State team. How are they as a team? I know definitely struggling compared to years past, but what's Ohio State going to have to look out for as far as playing this game?
You want to take that, Bill?
Yeah, well, first of all, to be honest with you, they're not a real strong team offensively, especially. They had a situation back-to-back games against Indiana and Iowa. They scored 7 points total. They're last in the conference in the points per game. So they're just not very productive. They got a quarterback, Rocky Lombardi. He's got a great name. Nice guy. Not a very good quarterback. And, they tried a new guy, a guy named Thorne early in the year. He couldn't get it done. Their running backs, none of their starting running backs have crossed the end zone yet. So, they're really struggling offensively. Big shot in the arm last week, though. Big win over Northwestern, which is huge for them. So that's the upbeat part. But, to be honest with you, their strength is in their defense, especially the linebacking core, and their nickel back's really good player. He's had 5 interceptions. But they're really young offensively. All their starting skilled athletes, are either freshmen or sophomores. Hayward is a backup, so he's an upperclassman, but he's really splitting time as a running back. So they just a very average team in relation to a normal Michigan State.
Yeah, and Justin, the offensive woes at Michigan State, they aren't new. This has been the problem in that program for many years now, well back into the Mark D'Antonio era, where it was just they could play defense for days, but they lost a lot of 17, 16 games. Lost a couple of 1-point games to Ohio State, in fact, where they just couldn't manufacture enough offense. And when you watch them this year, it's painful at times.
Yeah, it is. And I think this is a game that Ohio State needs, especially their secondary, because you have a quarterback that has 8 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He only has a 54 completion percentage rating, and they're running in the Big Ten. They're last. They have 98 yards a game, and Ohio State is second in stopping the run. So I think this is a game that the secondary needs, because you're not facing a very good quarterback. They're not going to be able to run the ball. So they're going to be forced to throw at some point, and that can build the confidence of a secondary that struggled, especially in the second half of games. Yeah, look at Rutgers, look at Penn State.
Well, I'm sorry about that, Justin. Bill, about that point, when you talk about what Ohio State has to improve, again, we're operating from the perspective that we don't know who's available and who's not available, et cetera. So when you talk about the defensive backfield, we're just going off what we know is available on the roster at this point, not who's going to be on the field on Saturday. Having the break, what turned out to be a break here, not playing Illinois last week, trying to recover from the struggles they had against Indiana, what do you think over the last 2 weeks has been do you think it's been good for that group to have a little recovery time, or do you think they needed to play?
They need to play. Because you couldn't go also with full practices this week, that doesn't help. That group needs as many on-field reps as possible, either practice or game situation. But the fortunate thing this week is Rocky he's thrown 8 touchdown passes. He's thrown 8 interceptions. So he's a guy that doesn't get much protection from his offensive line. He forces the ball sometimes. And so I think that'll help our secondary have a little more success. Now, if there ever was a game where the defense has a chance of a shutout, it's this week. So I'm going for a Buckeye shutout in East Lansing.
Well, we'll see, especially up front, Christine. The Buckeye defensive line, you can measure these things in a number of ways, right? But the scouts that work at Pro Football Focus College this week rated the top defensive lines from a performance standpoint across the country, like across all the Power 5 conferences, and Ohio State's number 1. And it's a little bit surprising because they don't lead the country in sacks. They don't lead the Big Ten in sacks. But their metrics are, what kind of pressure did you apply? How did you affect a quarterback? How did you obviously shut down running games? Like, evaluate those players, put it together. They've got Jonathan Cooper as the number 1 rated player in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
And then they love the defensive line. So to Bill's point, that defensive line gets pressure. By those metrics, you would expect them to be in the backfield a lot Saturday. And that's frankly, regardless of the depth factor of who's in, who's out, they're deep. They've got a lot of talented defensive ends, and they don't have a ton of talented defensive tackles, but the ones that we have seen play have done a very nice job this year with plugging up run holes and applying pressure from the middle of the field. I think it's a pretty remarkable group, frankly. They just don't have the sack numbers to back it up.
Do you think that's going to factor in all of those stats that you just gave when the committee does meet again, even if it's, way less games Ohio State is playing over, like we were talking about earlier in the sports office, and undefeated Cincinnati team?
Justin, what do you think?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, Christine, go ahead.
So Jared was listing off all the stats about Ohio State being number 1 and this and that, and having, this great defense as far as stopping the run. Do you think that will factor in, despite the fact that they haven't played any games versus
relatively,
not any games, but very few games compared to, like we were talking about earlier, an 11-0 Cincinnati, or Jared, heck, your Marshall Herd.
Go Herd.
Herd.
Yeah, it very well may, but we heard from the committee chair, and he said that what they're impressed by is the points that Ohio State puts up on offense. So I think as long as they continue to do that, he thinks that Ohio State's offense is more lethal than a Texas A&M or a Florida, and that's what people want to see in a playoff game. They want to see a high-scoring game, 2 offenses going at it, and you're going to have that because Ohio State's secondary really hasn't stopped anybody. So maybe they do look at number of games, and that's what Coach Conley talked about at the very beginning of this. But as long as Ohio State can get to the Big Ten championship and play that game, then I think that's going to be more impressive to them that Ohio State has a team that puts up 45 points a game, and they want to see a team like that over a team like Texas A&M, who only put up 20 against a below average at best LSU defense last week.
I think ESPN and Nielsen would like to see Ohio State too.
Bill, this is the point that I was making to Christine, is that, let's just speak real for a minute here, all right? This is a business. This college football playoff is meant to be a showcase for the sport and make a lot of money. And the idea that an undefeated Ohio State, no matter how many games they've played, would be left out and replaced with a team, maybe a second team from the SEC or the ACC, or a non-Power 5 like Cincinnati or whatever. I'd love to see Cincinnati make the Final Four. But I think if the committee evaluates it and they get down to brass tacks, who you taking, right? The brand and the eyeballs that it attracts, and they're a good team. If you add those things up, I don't know how you say no. You can use metrics and all that, and that's fun, and it's good for the press conference. But on the business side, Bill, I don't know how you say no.
Exactly right. Ohio State turns on more televisions than anybody. And when you cut out the Big Ten out of a playoff with an undefeated Ohio State team, then, you're making a huge, huge mistake.
They could do it, but it would be at their own peril.
Exactly.
If you plug in undefeated Cincinnati, who, by the way, everybody's rooting for Cincinnati. Don't get me wrong, it would be awesome to see UC stay undefeated, play well, give themselves a great opportunity to be in that final group. If that opportunity does present itself here December 20th, it would be amazing. And to see what Luke has done there, that's awesome. They deserve an opportunity to showcase their ability at the highest level. But when I
know one thing for sure, they would beat Vanderbilt by more than Texas A&M would. Well, and we cannot practice for a year and beat Vanderbilt.
See, that's my point, Bill, is that every team at the top.
Let's tell it how it is.
That's the point, right?
I love it.
Like, every team at the top has warts. Everybody's got something ugly.
Sure.
On their resume. They do.
Everybody know, but can we just think of another analogy?
All right, acne? What do you like, something classier?
I don't know. Gray hair.
Everyone has blemishes.
don't know.
If I say it with an English accent, is that better?
Warts are fine. Whatever.
But you know what I'm saying, guys? Like, if you look at every team in that top 10, even the teams that have had great years so far, they all have problems. You know, to your point, Bill, A&M Saturday night, that was an awful game against a team that's not very good this year, LSU. It was awful. And it took a defensive touchdown in the second half to at least get them going a little bit. You know, you could argue Florida's playing better, and A&M has the head-to-head win.
Well, I think the worst case scenario is that Florida wins out, Alabama wins out, Florida plays Alabama for that SEC title, and then Florida wins that game. So then you're looking at 2 teams in the SEC, 2 teams in the ACC, and Clemson and Notre Dame, Florida, Alabama, and then Ohio State doesn't get to play in that Big Ten championship, and that's where I can see them left out of the playoff.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I think the other problem is, you know, the committee's their directive is very simple, right? It's the best 4 teams. So if they think the best 4 teams are 2 SEC teams and 2 ACC teams, then, you know, so be it. But on the other hand, when you get down to what this is, really good football is being played all over the country. And if we're saying that it's going to turn into NASCAR, you know, NASCAR has been a Southeastern American driven sport where the roots of the sport are in the Southeastern United States. That's where college football is right now. That's what we're saying, is that nobody else. Y'all are adorable playing in the North. Y'all are adorable playing out West, but no.
You know, making me like a shoulder twitch whenever you do that.
Well, this is where the finger can get pointed right back at the Big Ten commissioner, who didn't do his best to get the Big Ten on the field earlier.
Yep.
And so that's the Big Ten fault right there. You should never let that happen.
And look, everybody's still COVID doesn't care what conference you're in. I mean, we have discussed that many times now. Everybody's lost games, and the protocols that were put into place in the Big Ten were obviously significant when you look at the 21-day quarantine period for. It's a 10-day quarantine, but then it's the additional 11 days are to basically get back onto the field, go through the heart testing you have to go through with myocarditis, and then it's an acclimation period. So really the quarantine is only 10 days, but you still can't play for 21. No other league in America has that. You know what I mean? Like, there are some things that they did in the Big Ten beyond starting late that made it more difficult for teams to recover. Obviously, the most important thing here is health. The most important thing is that the men and the women who are working on the support staff side, who are a part of these programs, the human beings involved here, they come first. And if we don't lose sight of that, that's probably a good thing, that we remember that these are human beings and we need to take care of people. But when they're healthy and when they're ready to play, and then they can't play because of a regulation, I think that's a hard argument to win.
Yeah, very hard argument, because there's so much of this thing that's not known yet. And so that the effect has been nationwide. It hasn't been just in the Big Ten area. Mm-hmm. So the point is, critical mistake, in my opinion, decision that was made early.
Well, we'll find out. Maybe they change their rules this week. Maybe they, take a hard look at what has to be done here. But I think the only thing you can't do is nothing.
Yeah. I think the other thing worth noting is that you can still play on the 19th, even if you don't play in the Big Ten championship.
Right.
The number 2 team in the East can play the number 2 team in the West. And that could shape up to be Ohio State versus Wisconsin if Ohio State doesn't play those 6 games. So even if they don't play in the Big Ten championship, they can still go and play, someone like Wisconsin and win that game handily. Then they can still qualify and be eligible for the playoff.
Right. Let me paint a ratings picture for you. December 19th at noon, the Big Ten championship game, Northwestern versus Indiana, with a backup quarterback. 8 o'clock, national TV.
Good God.
Ohio State, Wisconsin.
The ads will be 4 times as much.
Do you think the ratings are 4 times higher for the 8 p.m. game than the actual championship game?
Maybe 5.
Fox might try to get that game.
Well, you know what? They won Title I, the championship, and won the real championship.
I mean, yeah, an asterisk should certainly be put on that. Gentlemen, We are about up on our Zoom time here because we still don't have the premium package.
Gotta quit telling people that.
What? They can see it, Jared. It's at the top of the screen. They can see the countdown clock where it says upgrade to Pro. I mean, like it's secrets out.
What you're doing is taking a highlighter to it.
Okay.
Please look at the top of the screen.
I can hide it next time. I want to end on a funny note, and I'm really glad that Andy Long showed me Billy Griffin's videos a few weeks ago because had he not, this Mr. Griffin is commenting on Jared's page right now, and I would have thought he was serious. However, he is serious about this one. Coach, fun fact, COVID wears a mask because it's afraid of Coach Conley.
They ain't going right. You better not get close to me. It's over.
I hope Billy is still watching. He also wrote another comment. I'm not going to read it. It's too long, but it was hilarious.
Well, we need to tell people, if you want to find Billy Griffin, go to YouTube and search for Irrational Buckeye Fan. And every week, Billy Griffin does this. Billy's a comedian and an actor in Los Angeles who played quarterback for Coach Conley at Ohio Dominican. He was an intern here at Channel 4. Mm-hmm. And every week, his character, Dale is his name, releases his Irrational Buckeye Fan rant. And
let me see. Is he still commenting?
It's some of the best interneting you'll do all week.
It's so funny. Yeah, well, I think his character is now commenting on Jared's page. He must have
Dale?
Well, it's Billy, but like he's typing like Dale. You're too level-headed for Dale, Jared.
No, Dale has nothing for me. Ridiculous.
All right, guys, noon kickoff, Michigan State. We're all very excited about that. I have to keep a bow on this. What happened to our Zoom call?
Y'all time out.
Fingers crossed, toes crossed, everything. You know, hopefully everybody is healthy and we can get back on the field. Traveling to Michigan State this weekend. We'll have our Buckeye pregame show like roughly 11:30, and then you can stay with us for post-game coverage as well, Jared and the team on Saturday. Do you have all the shows?
All the shows, as best we can tell, Christine, in this 2020 pandemic, as best we know right now.
Hey, listen, we've got a football game on our air coming up here in a few minutes. This is the most FaceTime from the talent you might get all day.
You want to know that things are weird? We got an NFL game on a Wednesday at 3:30 here on NBC4. That's weird.
Weird, Jar.
Waiting all day for Wednesday afternoon.
That's right. As Hank Williams famously said.
All right, gentlemen, we will see you guys back here very soon. And make sure you tune in for the football game, and we're going to be doing some web shows here as well for the regular news. We'll see you later.
Go Bucks.
There it is.
Well done, fellas.